Good morning, everyone. It's a quiet morning. It's a silent morning. We have the long version of the parable of talents today. The parable of the talents. As we draw closer to the end of this year, this liturgical year, as I've said continuously, we are invited to examine the certain areas of our life in regards to the journey of our life, our faith, our experiences of life, the fruits of our labor. We will find ourselves in the moment of what we call judgment, heaven and hell. As you know, next week we will find ourselves with the great feast of Christ the King that culminates everything, and we close the end of this year, and then we start the whole experience of Advent, the birth and the coming of Christ. As you step into this experience of this parable of the talents today, it's a whole story about the spiritual dynamics. It's about the spiritual elements that's unfolding in your life every day. I'm going to take you into this beautiful parable. It's quite a lengthy one, but it's good for us to step ourselves. And just like all parables, you have to find yourself like good listeners, how you could find yourselves in any of the characters or the personalities in the gospel. Just to listen and ask yourself, where do I find myself sitting in the gospel today? What's the message? What's the takeaway message for me this morning about this parable? The parable starts off with a master, a rich man, a landowner, a good man, and he's about to go on a journey. And he's about to take this trip, and it's going to be a long journey. And so he calls upon himself his servants, his stewards, if you like it, his stewards and his servants together. And he entrusts to them what we call in today's gospel the talents. I just want you to have an idea that in the biblical sense, in scripture texts, when you speak of talents, it's not what we speak today. It's like gifts. Am I good in this? Am I good in that? It's not that. In the biblical sense, talents is about money. It's a chunk. It's a whole load of money. You know, it's silver and it's in gold. And the whole idea is how you invest, how you make use of this money, this gift that God has given you. So the gospel text is about gifts and it's about talents and your response. That's it. The master gives them the gift and he wants to see what's the response. God has blessed us, my dear friends, in 100-fold. God has endowed with us with gifts. As Ephesians 2:10 will tell us, we are God's handiwork. We are the instruments of God. God has given us so much. So to the first guy, he gave 5 talents. To the second guy, he gave 2 talents. And to the last one, he gave 1 talent. What is important is you look at this gospel text, the line is, each one was given in proportion to their abilities. That's the important text that we... First is God gives us everything that we need in human life. And secondly is we are given this gift in accordance to our ability. Simply meaning God knows us. God knows each of us. I know my own and my own know me. We are in God's hand. And God gives us what we require every day, what we need in this journey of life, the blessings that God has showered us with. The question here is, how do we respond to this gift? How do we respond to these blessings of God? How do we nurture these gifts that God has given you? The first guy, he took the 5 talents and he went and he worked on it. He worked on it and he gave back to the master another 5. In simple words, my dear friends, he lived a fruitful and a fulfilled life. He gave back what he received. The second guy did likewise. He took the 2 talents, the 2 gifts, the 2 blessings. Find yourselves this morning, whatever you're comfortable with. And he went and he worked on it. He generated it. He invested in it. And he gave back to the master 2 more. He lived a fulfilled, a fruitful life. And he's happy with it. But the last guy, that's interesting. The last guy took that 1 talent and he went and hid it. You know, in the Palestinians, the Jewish culture, They didn't have banks. They didn't have safes. And when it came to money and in property, what they did was to dig a hole and bury it. That's the safest they could think. And that's what the last guy did. He took and he hid it. And the reasoning that is given to us is the simple word fear. He was afraid to step out and to work on those gifts, on those talents, on those blessings, whatever that the Lord has given. He just looked at it within himself and says, fear, and he collapsed. You know, when I look at my life today and in my ministry as a priest, and for the many years that I've worked with people, especially in parishes and in ministry, I find that one of the most detrimental experience of life is fear. Fear to step out, fear to do something. One of the things that I hear very often is fear of criticism. What would people say? Fear of what people will speak of you. Fear of receiving negative remarks. So what we do is we silent and we stay away from the crowd. And we just remain where we are. Fear. Some of us have this fear of what we call in life today, self-esteem. Oh, Father, I've only got one. The guy has 5. The other guy has 2. I'm nobody, Father. I can't do much. Let the others do, Father. I'll stay where I am. You know, when Peter, on that fishing net, on that fishing boat, when Jesus told him to throw it into the deep, and when he caught a whole net full of fish, he ran up to Jesus, and on the ground he fell and he says, Lord, I'm a sinful man. I'm unworthy. That's how we look at ourselves. I'm unworthy to work in the parish. I'm unworthy to give myself. I'm just not there. I'm a sinner. And Jesus says, Peter, get up, Peter. Do not be afraid. From now, you're not going to catch fishes, Peter. You're going to catch men and women. You're going to be a fisher of people. And that was the beginning. Peter was just a fisherman. And if you look at the vocations of all the great saints, they were ordinary people just living it in an extraordinary moment. Just beginning to look at themselves as God's handiwork. As we begin to look at this response today, why I'm saying this to you is it brings us today to a very special moment today. It's the 4th World Day of the Poor today. Today it's the 4th World Day of the Poor. The 33rd Sunday, and it's the 15th of November. Holy Father Pope Francis, in his message to the Universal Church, to the Church, he says this: the theme for this year is stretch forth your hand to the poor. Stretch your hand out to the poor. That's the invitation of Pope Francis. You know, when I look at life today, my dear friends, there is a cry. There is a rallying cry out there. There are people who are in loneliness, people who are in misery in the midst of this pandemic. There are people who have lost their sense of income. There are people who are feeling distress, anxious. People who are tired, a sense of fatigue of this COVID pandemic. There are people who are just searching for a moment to return back to the church, to community, to society, to your families. There is a whole cry out there. And God has blessed us with so much, my dear friends. All you need to do is take a moment to look at our lives today. How we could stretch our hands to the poor. The message that Pope Francis spoke so simply and plainly was one beautiful line. When I looked at this message was, a hand held out is a sign that speaks of closeness, solidarity, and love. A hand that stretches out is a hand of closeness, solidarity, and love. What is important, my dear friends, as we look at this beautiful experience today, as stewards, as servants, reaching out, stretching out our hands, if only you could take a moment to look at the blessings in your life as a gift from God first, then you'll be able to give that gift to someone. If only you have found a moment to seek gratitude from God for all that He has showered us, then you will give freely. Freely received, freely given. But the moment you find yourself in that self-centeredness of your life, and saying, I have to keep it. I have to be safe. I have to bury it. I need it. You will not be able to stretch it out, my dear friends. You will not be able to stretch it out today. Pope Francis tells us closeness, solidarity, and love. To me personally, as I step into this beautiful parish, it's all about the migrants today. There is a huge cry out here. People who have just lost their contacts with family, lost their sense of belonging, lost their income and jobs, lost their self-identity in this moment. And they are searching and seeking for closeness, solidarity, and love. I invite you this morning as you begin this day and journey back into these last days of life as we speak of, that ticket to heaven. Let's find a moment to cultivate God's blessings. Let's find a moment to cultivate what God has showered us. It may be 5, it may be 2, it may be 1. It doesn't matter. All of us are gifted in our own capacity, in our own capability. All we need to do is how do we cultivate it and how do we share it to others. That's the depth of today's message, my dear friends. When we can trust God in everything and everywhere, God will give us more. To the one who has given more, more will be given. To the one who has least, even that will be taken away. Faithful stewards. One of the things that I find in life is that sometimes we use this phrase, oh Father, he wasted his life. Maybe sometimes we could ask ourselves, it's good sometimes when we could live a fruitful and a full life by giving God's blessings to others.